What is up, guys? Welcome back to another Enscape video. Really excited about this video. Should be a great time because in this video we're going to be covering how to make a video, an actual animation in Enscape, how to piece it all together, make a nice smooth animation of your entire project or whatever piece of your project that you want. Before we get into it, if at any point in this video you do learn something, please demolish that like button. It really does help. Really does. So let's get right into it. I'm working with the basic out-of-the-box default project in Revit 2020, and we're going to make our animation in Enscape from this project. So I'm going to go to the window. I've got my Enscape here. I've got this start location set up. That doesn't matter so much with video, but just so you know, I'm going to start in this location, and I'll probably just path throughout this house, maybe inside out. Might end with just looking up at it, but we'll kind of build that as we go. We'll create that as we go. So there's not a whole lot that we need to do, except we now need to go back to Revit and turn the video editor on. There's a simple button for that. And as soon as I do that, go back to Enscape and see that I've got this video editor. It's pretty straightforward, but what I'm going to do is start to break down how to use this and how all of this is used to build a full Enscape video. So for this video, for this animation, I'm not going to worry so much about what my scene looks like. I'll save that for another video. There's numerous different visual settings that we could apply, effects, whatever it might be, to what we see as we build the animation, that I'm just not going to go through. So I'm going to keep it where it is now, but so this tutorial will be simply to go through building a video, building an animation in Enscape. The first thing we need to know is that it's based on keyframes. And if you've never heard of keyframes before, it's just a series of different points throughout a video that denote something. In this case, in Enscape, it's going to denote a new location. Just like having a different view favorited, you can jump to that location. It kind of works the same way, and where once you set up a number of keyframes in a line, you then have different locations that a camera is located and can jump to create the animation. Along with that, you can start to apply different effects as far as the time of day and whatever, and the speed at which this happens. We'll get into all of that, but I first want to get a few keyframes down, and we can see what we need to do after that. So right now, you can see I've got my video editor. I'm in video editor mode, and you'll know that you are because you'll see the editor right there, all right down here. And I will be able to show this better in just a second after we make a couple of keyframes, but imagine that your viewing window is an actual camera. In a way it kind of is, just because of what you see, but the way these keyframes work, I'm actually going to get a physical camera that shows up where I took this keyframe that I can jump back and forth to. So at this point, I do like to be in walk mode, especially if you're walking through a space. It's nice to continuously be in walk mode. And so I, by default, am not. I'm in fly mode, so I'm going to hit the space bar. I'm going to fall to the ground, and I know at this point if I move forward, I'm actually going to move forward on the ground and not up in the air. So at this point, I'm just going to hit add keyframe. And as soon as I do that, you can see I've got this little play button, but that's not necessarily a play button. It's telling me now I have my first keyframe, which is all the way at the beginning of my scene. Now I can always freely move, but if I move now, I can see that I have a camera sitting right there. It looks funny, but that is noting that I have a keyframe, and in this case, because I only have one keyframe, it's sitting there in that first position. So like I said, maybe we want to walk forward, and we'll walk forward all the way to the point to where we are looking outside right here. So maybe we want this to be our second keyframe. And by second keyframe, I mean location. So it's not about what I do between adding the keyframe 1 and adding keyframe 2, because I could fly out to space here, whatever. Then I could always come back and land. I'm basically only determining a location. So again, I want to be in this location for my second keyframe. So let's hit add keyframe. So once I do that, you can see I've got a start and an end. And as I do that, and as I add more, I'm going to start to get multiple keyframes populated throughout this line. So right now, because I have 2, it's only telling me that this is between the first and second one, start and finish, whatever. You can start to add, and now time comes into play. So right now, I'm just looking at it down here. The total duration is 14 seconds. So if I were to play this, that means that the animation would be 14 seconds long, and it would take 14 seconds to get from this first key point back there, that first camera, to this one here. Okay, that's great. And so you can determine how long you might want that to take. So let's go ahead and make that something like 6 seconds. We want it to happen a little faster in this case. And we can tweak all of this later on, and ultimately we will. So once I've got 2, we can start to look at this as a whole. And you can imagine this is an infinite number of keyframes that you've added, but regardless, this works all the same. So I can actually highlight over each one of these keyframes, and as I do that, they'll turn green. And whenever I click over that, I'm immediately taken to that location. And you might notice that I have this weird camera overlay, and that's only because I'm physically in that camera. I'm inside that keyframe. And the nice part about this is I can easily position what I want to look at specifically. I've got my rule of thirds that work both ways for me with the little guides. That's nice to see. So I can even more in fine detail determine what I want to look at. Okay, that's great. Now, this is nice too, because a lot of times you'll have to come in and tweak the timing, and that's going to be in the timestamps. So you're going to have to determine, how fast you go from one keyframe to the next, and all of that's going to be found within this timestamps here. And we'll have to enable that to be able to determine how fast or slow we want this to be. I always like to keep the field of view at 90 degrees. You can start to see now all the different effects that you can apply. So there's, I will cover time of day last because, again, it's another effect. But depth of field, you can choose to apply that if you want. I never really have needed to do that, but I would probably only use depth of field if you're trying to look at a location and then slightly change the depth of field to get an idea of the vastness of the space. Now, we don't need to do this here, but so this is just a more basic example of how to put a video and animation together using some of these basic tools in Enscape. So once I'm done here, and I've set my time, maybe I've determined that I want this to be 6 seconds right there, I can hit apply, and you're going to have to hit apply because if you don't hit apply, it won't save it. Otherwise, if you hit back, it won't save this new location, new timestamp, everything. So let's hit apply. And once I do that, now I can go back. And once I go back, you can see I've got that timing set up. This is basically telling me that I have applied some sort of non-default effect to this particular keyframe. Now the nice part is, maybe I determined that halfway through here, like I get all the way through here and I get to this second keyframe, and I determine, it would be nice to just, as I get to this point and along the hall, to just look down the hall. Well, we can do that pretty simply because, you might think I need to add another keyframe or I need to physically move this keyframe. There's 2 ways you could do it. You could go into this camera like we were just a second ago, and you can physically move that camera to look there, and then you can go and add another one where we have this camera now. Or you can highlight over any point along this path, and you can click, and once you do that, you will essentially have made another keyframe. And now you can see I just made another keyframe, and so I'm essentially in the middle of the path between that first camera and that second camera. And so, like I said, I want to just look down the path. I'm going to make sure to click space because every time you go into a camera or something like that, it's going to put you in fly mode, which, not a big deal. And honestly, it's not going to move you up or down, but just it's best, at least in my mind, best practice to hit the space bar and know that you're on the ground if you actually want to be on the ground. So in this case, I do. So I hit the space bar. And like I said, we're just looking down the hallway. It's that simple. So this is where timestamps gets kind of funny. So we can see now that I can see the distance between my first keyframe and my second one because I have 3, and this is the one in the middle. I can see obviously the first one starts at 0, and the second one, or now the third one, starts or ends. The whole video ends at 6 seconds. So I can't make this camera be in view at 6 seconds. I can't do that. So basically, if I want this to be as smooth as possible, I probably want this to be somewhere in the middle. So I'm going to just dump that at 3 seconds. Leave that at 3 seconds right now. I'm going to hit confirm. Once I do that, now I can see I've got my keyframe editor, and this is clearly keyframe 2 of 3. Perfect. I know that because if I go back, I can see I've got 3 keyframes right here, and this is the second one. I'm going to go back into this one, and another way of you easily being able to navigate between different keyframes is once you're in the keyframe editor, you can use this left and right arrow as sort of a back and forward. So I can go back, and this is going to take me all the way to keyframe 1, and maybe I want to reposition what I'm looking at. I can hit apply again, then I can go to keyframe 2. Maybe I want to change the timing. Maybe I need 4 seconds to get there. I can hit apply, and now maybe I go to my final, and instead of having this be 6 seconds, I want it to take longer to get to this point. And now the nice thing is that I have a second keyframe before this one. I could see exactly where it is. I could see it's at that 4 seconds. So let's say maybe we want this to take another 4 seconds, and we can put that about 8 seconds. I can apply, back, there we go. That's great. One thing I like to keep on just by default, especially if you want a smooth experience, is to have this easy in, easy out. If you're familiar with After Effects or Premiere Pro or something like that, there is an easy in, easy out option for just basic transitions. And it's kind of a universal term, but it basically smooths transitions as you change from one keyframe to the next. In this case, if you're going from one location to the next, you don't want to just quickly jerk around. If for some reason you want to, great. Now, shaky camera, this is almost like you're holding a camera. You've seen movies like that, like Cloverfield. That's absurd. I would never want anything like that for anything like this as far as an Enscape presentation goes. Now, maybe you do for some reason. Then you could apply that. I've never applied it because it's kind of a mess, and it doesn't quite really help your presentation. So a couple things we can do here. I can always add another keyframe. That's just going to add another keyframe to the very last one where I currently am and where I'm looking. I can also remove all if you just want to start over, start from scratch. The preview is really nice, and I use this a lot. You can just hit P. So I'm going to hit P, and it's going to literally preview everything that I'm looking at. And you could kind of see that maybe that's not exactly what we're after, because just the way the transitions work and how these cameras transition from looking at one thing to the next, I don't necessarily want to begin like having the camera angle as I'm outside and then end up looking down the hallway. I want to walk in straight, then turn. Well, how would we do that? We'd probably just need to add a few more keyframes. And so honestly, I've kind of covered the basics of adding keyframes and making a video, because at this point you can simply export this, and I will export this when we're done to show you how to do that as well. But that's kind of the basics of adding all these keyframes, and so it can take literally 30 seconds to add all the keyframes that you want and be done with it. Now, what makes a good animation versus a bad one is, in my opinion at least, and this is just my opinion, it's how smooth and how clean all the transitions look. Because, like I said, anyone can make this in 30 seconds and flat. It takes nothing to do this. You just add all these keyframes and you export. But it's getting everything to where the timing and the level of smoothness to work out all together seamlessly. That is where the challenge comes in. And so it's going to vary with every animation you make, but my hope here is that I can give you at least one example of trying to smooth out a situation to where how you would do that and what you would have to do to achieve it. So let's go back into this one. And so, like I said, if we wanted to walk up the walkway here, and then as we get to this point, then finally turn, I need to add a couple more keyframes. So like I said, let's go ahead and hit the space bar. And I'm going to make a keyframe here that's actually going to be where I'm looking. And again, all these keyframes are based on location and what the camera's looking at. I'm going to apply this one. I'm going to go back, and I'm going to actually make another one here in the middle. This one now is going to be looking down the hall. I'm going to hit space bar. I'm going to look down the hall right here. And again, I'm going to need to adjust this because I don't want to go from the last keyframe to this keyframe in 1 second. Maybe I want this one to be 3 seconds. I'll hit confirm, I'll go back, and again, I need to make one more or else I'll be smoothing through the wall. I want to actually physically turn. So I'll make one more, and now I'm going to be looking straight here. Again, I just hit the space bar to go into walk mode right there. And this is where things get kind of weird. So now I have only like 2 seconds to work with. And why is that? That is because if I go to my last keyframe, I'm going to confirm this when I go to my last one. The timing itself is based on the first and the last keyframe. So if you need more time, you have to go to your last one and add more time. So maybe I want this, I'm going to say 15 seconds to work with. So we can go back and we can kind of smooth this out a little better. So I'm going to hit apply. I'm going to go back now. And maybe we want this to take that solid 4 seconds. I can hit apply. I'm going to go back now again. And we can see that this whole animation going from the keyframe previous to this one and finally the last one, that takes 6 seconds. That's great. So let's go ahead and preview this and see what we get. Okay, seems a little too quick there. That's not bad. And this seems a bit too slow. You know, maybe that's a good speed, but to me it seems a little too slow. So what I can do is I can click any one of these points here and go into it, and that will take me to each specific keyframe like I showed you before. You could also add and change the total duration here without having to go to the last one. It's one way to do it as well. So I'm going to go to the first one. Actually, I'm going to go to the second one. I'm going to make this take a little longer. I'm going to make this take 6 seconds. I'm going to hit apply, go to the next one. I'm going to make this one take 4 seconds there. And so as you can see, as I make things longer, I might have to just add duration on to the end. And you can see that I'm going to quickly have to do that in just a second. So that one's going to take, let's go ahead and make that let's go ahead and make that 3.5 seconds. And then finally this last one, it'll take, this is basically telling me I'm on the last one. It's going to take from the last keyframe 2 seconds right there. And now let's go ahead and make it like 3.5 again. Apply. I'll hit preview again and we can see where we are. Back, hit preview, hit P for preview, and we can see what this animation looks like. So I think that was a pretty decent speed, and things will slow down here. Okay. Yeah, I kind of like that a lot. That's looking good. I probably would refine it a little more if I were like actually going to finalize this and really be done with it, but I'm not necessarily doing that. The last thing I want to do is I want to get off the ground a bit, and I want to kind of fly around the building once and kind of end like that. So again, I can always add another keyframe just by clicking add keyframe or hitting K if I'm in this view, and that's just going to add one to the end, which is perfect, what I want in this case. So maybe what I want, because I want this to be smooth, I'm going to end up looking here. I'll add a keyframe, and then I will come over here and I will add a keyframe. And the cool part is you could actually see this path. It's really nice. And maybe we want to add one here. We can add one here. And you can see that it is adding duration to this, which is really nice. And finally, let's add one here. And this will be my last one. Right there. So now I'm going to start to preview this, and I'll clearly have to edit some of this as I go along because, again, the smoothness is not going to be exactly where I want it when it comes to revolving around the building in this case, but we can start to see what it looks like just by throwing keyframes out. So, you know, yeah, it's great. You know, to me, it's pretty slow. This is much slower than it really needs to be because at this point, I'm bored. Anyone else is like, what's going on? Why am I not seeing the building? So I'm going to hit escape to get out of there. I'm going to change that total duration. I'm going to bring it all the way down, probably to like, let's bring it down to like 30 seconds. Actually, let's go to, yeah, just over 30 seconds, 35 seconds maybe. So now I will hit preview again, and unfortunately you could see what happened there. The changing the total duration unfortunately impacts every single keyframe. So that's just something to be aware of. If you do change the total duration when you in that total duration menu, you've actually changed the total duration here, then you're kind of out of luck. You really need this to be what it was kind of set to, and which is why I like to go into my last keyframe and then adjust it that way. So this was about 135. So I'm going to go into this one, and I want to make this like 2 or 3. I'll do it 3 seconds to this one, hit apply, and again I want this one to be about probably 4 seconds after that last one. Again, probably another 4 seconds, apply. Go to the next one, probably another 4 seconds here, just to make sure it's a little smooth and kind of consistent. And then finally, make this 5 seconds, hit apply. So once I do that, I can hit back, and I can clearly see my total duration now has changed to 31 seconds. So the only time I would probably adjust the total duration is like at the beginning, before you've adjusted any of the smoothness, or if you're at the point where I can't go over 30 seconds and I don't care how fast it is. If that's the case, I'll just bring this down to 30 seconds and my video will be 30 seconds, but everything will kind of fit within that window. I'm going to leave that about 31 seconds though. So I'm going to hit preview and we're going to start to see what this looks like. Again, I've got the same speed and smoothness that I had before because I didn't affect the total duration. Now I'm just working with all of the keyframes after this point when I start to fly up in the air. So now this is going to start to move a little quicker because I had it all like 3 to 4 seconds for all of these. Okay, that's great. This is probably a little faster than I want to move, but for the sake of this video, you can kind of see how this will work, and you can easily slow this down if you need it to. But I'm pretty happy with that. And really, and once you are, that's great. There's not a whole lot else you can do. Last thing I want to do, and this is probably one of the coolest, easiest effects that you can do, is time of day. So let's go to my first keyframe. And so time of day is going to work the exact same. As far as moving it, you're going to be able to press and hold shift and move your right button. Press and hold the right mouse button and shift the time that way. And you'll see the time populated over here. So to get this to work, I can hit apply there, and just like anything else, I can change the time of day. So maybe we want to, just because, this is a video, we want to make it cool or whatever, maybe we start the video in the morning because, that makes sense. We'll start the video in the morning. Oops, I'm moving around here. I will start the video in the morning, and this is, about sunrise right here. I can start the video in the morning. Great, I can hit apply. And so if I don't add any more times of day and I hit preview, whatever, this is going to be my time of day. It's my time of day throughout the whole video. Okay, so maybe what I want to do is instead, like I said, change the time of day throughout the entire video to cycle through an entire day. So now let's go to the last keyframe. Again, I need to apply the time of day, and I'm just going to set it again. I'm going to set it now to, the evening, dusk, whatever that is. Right around here. That's good enough. I can hit apply. I'm going to go back, and so now I'm going to hit preview, and we can see that the whole scene, the weather, the time of day is changing as I move to encompass like a full day, and it's pretty nice as it kind of looks alive. It makes the scene liven up a bit. This is a really basic scene and there's not a lot going on, but it is pretty nice to be able to see all of this happen at one time. Now, if this were a real presentation, everything would look better. The visual quality would look better. I'd have my light settings probably 10 times better, and I'd probably not make this last the whole day. I'd probably make it last just like a couple hours at the most, just to slightly see some of the shadows change to make it look alive, like I said. So when you're happy with that, all you need to do is hit leave, and once you hit leave, you're kind of done. We can go back to Revit. the nice thing about this is that whenever I go back to Revit, I can hit video editor on, come back here, I can get it, I can adjust it all again, but it's always going to save this path. It's going to save this path in Enscape, but if you actually want to save it to where you close Enscape and come back, there's something we need to do. We need to actually go in and save our camera path. So under Enscape, there's camera path, and then I've got a load and a save. So maybe you want to make, maybe you've got 10 different animations you need to make for a presentation, or maybe you've got 10 different presentations and they're all in different locations. This is where the camera path comes into play. So like I said, you need to actually save out that path if you want to access it again whenever you use Enscape. So I would always save your path. You can save your path, and it doesn't necessarily matter where. For this case, I'll just save it in this path right here. I'll do path 1. I'll save it. That's great. You could easily just load the path there. You're going to quickly see path 1. It's a basic XML file, and you can load it in that way. So that's really nice and really helpful, and you're going to need to do that. So another thing that we need to do is actually export our video. So let's look at our visual settings. And these settings, specifically in the capture, are going to determine what our video quality is. So I personally like to keep the compression quality at, I would say, lossless, because I don't want to necessarily lose any, but maybe you need to send this in an email. Maybe you need to send this in the web, like through web, or maybe you're putting it online. But honestly, like Blu-ray or Maximum, those are both great if you're just going to launch the video on your specific desktop for a presentation. If you can afford to go lossless and you're not trying to send it anywhere, great, do that. I'll just keep it on Maximum for now, but this is the big key here. Frames per second, FPS, frames per second. So typically the human eye is, what we see is like between 30 and 60. Beyond 60, you start to perceive more smoothness. So most of your monitors are 60 hertz by default, and which means every second you're getting 60 frame refreshes. And so every 1 second, you're getting 60 different frames popping onto your monitor. That's perfect. So I would at least say that you should always use 60 frames per second at a minimum. If you can afford, the file size is going to double when you go up to 120, but it's also going to be that much smoother. And you'll also be able to, if you happen to have a monitor that is able to run a video at 120 hertz, play this at 120 frames per second, then I would definitely use that. Although if you don't have a monitor, or your monitor's not running off of, or not able to run 120 frames per second, then don't bother with it. Just use 60. So for the sake of this, I'll do 60. So once I do that, all I need to do is go to render video. And again, I just need to go to a location, name it, hit save. I'm going to call this animation, and I'll hit save. And once I do that, I'm going to go back to my Enscape window, and honestly, it's pretty quick. Now, it's going to have to render every single frame, but you can see I'm just sitting here, and it's going pretty quick. So this is probably going to take, 5 minutes at the most. Like, this is really not bad, and it's a solid animation, like 100% quality, but it's going to run through the entire animation basically and render every single frame. You can see it is slowly rendering every single frame. Now I will say also, if you choose 120 frames per second, it's going to double the rendering time from 60, because I'm currently doing 60 frames per second. So every second of video is 60 different frames it has to render. So this is what, a 30-second video, so that's 1800 frames. So you can start to do the math that way, and even still, this is going really quick. By the time I get up and get a coffee, this is going to be good to go. And you could export this as many times as you want to get the perfect animation. So I'm not going to let this finish. There's no real need to, but honestly, this is going to take 5 minutes. So I will leave you with this. If you have any questions, please leave those in the comment section below. I'll be happy to answer them. I know it can be kind of complicated. You'll get the hang of it, because a lot of it has to do with making it smooth, making it look good, and once you get all the keyframes, it's just about the smoothness. You can do it. I know you can. If you did learn something, please demolish that like button. It really, really helps me out a lot. I really appreciate all of my new subscribers. If you're not subscribed, which apparently most of you aren't, that's honestly surprising to me. If you're not, change the phase of that subscribe button to existing. That really, really helps me as well. If you did like this video, there's going to be a lot more coming out like it. I've got more Enscape videos, more Rev videos coming in the very near future. I sure hope to see you with those. Have a wonderful day, and thanks for watching.